Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today for this Panasonic Tech Talk. I'm Russell Pope, the manager of product management for Panasonic Life Solutions Company here in North America. I'm happy to have Paul Kriescher joining us today from Heart of a Building, and I'll let him spend a couple of minutes telling us kind of how he got to where we are today with Heart of the Building and kind of some of his background.
Cool. So Russell, thank you. I'll just give you a minor correction because you don't speak German, obviously, but it's Paul Kriescher. So just so you know that, going forward. But I'm the executive producer and host of Heart of a Building. Heart of a Building, we are video episodes airing currently on Rocky Mountain PBS, but looking to have it spread out to other PBS affiliates, showcasing the why behind high performance homes and buildings. And a big reason for this, the reason this exists, it's only existed now for a little over 2 years, and our first episode only aired this last April during Earth Day week. But it exists because of my nearly 27 years of being involved with energy efficiency and the sustainability movement around buildings, and always being impressed by the deep reasons why people were doing cutting edge buildings, whether that was passive solar back in the day, or natural, bring in natural lighting, or optimizing mechanical ventilation to have good indoor air quality, or these days, now net zero and zero emission homes and passive house. I've always been fascinated by those people that are like at that cutting edge, that they're spending the extra money, going through the extra headache, dealing with all this to show that it can be done. And what's beautiful here in 2021 is that we are now at a place where this is far more common, and it can be done really by everybody, so long as they are aware of what can be done. So that's a big part of why we're sharing these stories, so people can see it being done in single family, multifamily, commercial buildings, and see that they could apply it to their own home, or if they're buying a new home, or if they're involved with a commercial building or a multifamily building, that they can see that this is not science fiction anymore. That's very doable.
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of changes, and a lot of those changes are around the type of products that are being utilized in these construction, the different residential and commercial construction. A long time ago when a house was built pretty leaky, the needs for fresh air kind of happened naturally, but there's a lot of things that have changed. So what are some of the changes in product types that you're seeing, and some of the things that builders are doing differently today to make sure that the structures that they're building are both healthy and sustainable?
So, some of the big things have been happening. I'll give credit going back more than 20 years, about 20 years now. The Energy Star program on a national level really did some things for the residential market to say you have to build buildings more energy efficiently, but also build them much more airtight. And then what are you doing to ventilate that? And so when that started at that time, it was a big push towards caulking and foaming and doing things like that. Well, we've now evolved, I'd say, past that, where there are materials being used that have to do with super adhesive, highly durable tapes. And that doesn't sound very sexy, but they've come out of Germany in particular and other parts of the world, and now are readily available around, in North America, everywhere, to be doing things to seal up all the little connections that make it very uncomfortable in that old house that you were mentioning that didn't need the ventilation, the old barn houses. Yeah, they had no problems with indoor air quality, but they sure as heck were not comfortable to be in the summertime or the wintertime, let alone for safety purposes as far as, indoor air quality would be fine if the outdoor air was fine, but if you have forest fires like we had this last summer, you're just breathing all that in too. So anyway, tapes have been a huge part of it. There's certainly been a lot of use of closed cell foam and some use of open cell foam. Good products, they certainly do have an environmental footprint in the manufacturing of those and even the installation of those, but still very good as far as making a more airtight envelope. We also just learned a lot, I'd say, in the last 20 years, that to make a home or building really perform and be very comfortable, you have to insulate things properly. In the past, there was a lot where it's just like, well, put the insulation in there, it's good. Well, we've learned that has a lot to do with the installation quality to make sure everything works well together. And if you have an airtight envelope, then you're stopping that flow of air through insulation and inside and outside. So, the big changes I'd say have to do with high performance air tightening tapes and then foams that have come in to make things very airtight. But once they're airtight, then we have to be doing the ventilating it right. Correct, Russell?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. The philosophy used to be dilution is the solution with air quality. So the idea was if the air was bad indoors, you just exhausted it to the outdoors. But we've seen that technology changed a lot, haven't we? So now we've got I consider it like an umbrella policy. So we should have, you've got your house and all the things that you need to address are humidity, whether it's too humid or too dry. You've got filtration for particulate matter, like you mentioned, the wildfires. That's a big concern and a lot of contaminants there. And then you've got contaminated air that you want to exhaust from certain locations. So if we're looking at covering the healthy home needs in the house, there's a lot of different products that are available today. One of them that you've been seeing a lot of, I'm sure, are energy recovery ventilators that are really helping to capture some of that energy that would otherwise be lost if you were just exhausting air and not doing anything to help precondition the air that you're bringing back into the space.
Right. Especially in a time of, the pandemic with COVID, but just if you think about from flus or colds or things like that, it's like having mechanical ventilation that really works and having at least an ERV or an HRV, either energy recovery ventilator or heat recovery ventilator, depending on what part of the country you're in. It's like those are incredibly important. And the prices of those have been coming down a bit, but they will come down more if more people are aware of them and start demanding them. Because I find in the clients that I still work with as we work on new projects, but the ones that we're interviewing, they of course understand, well, they've come to learn and now understand that it's like, if I know where my fresh air is coming from, as opposed to just having something like a bath fan on a timer, and you might be sucking air in from your garage, where you have the paint cans and the car exhaust and other things. If you know where it's coming from a dedicated clean source, and then being able to warm that air up at this time of the year as air from inside the house is exhausted past it through a heat exchanger, people love it. But unfortunately, I'm only finding it in a small number of production builders and in most custom builders, but certainly less so in multifamily and certainly less so in commercial buildings, where they're informing their buyers or their occupants about this powerful and relatively inexpensive little piece of equipment, or several pieces of equipment if it's a bigger building, to properly give them really good indoor air quality. So it's, again, for Heart of a Building, we're trying to make that, make people more aware that exists and help them understand that it's not in the future, it's now. They can really increase their health safety by a piece of equipment, and yet too few people know about it. So we're trying to help raise awareness around that.
But I think that that's really one of the missing parts of the equation is how do we get this information to the consumer? And programs like you're doing are huge for us to get that information out, for the consumers to be aware of what they should be asking their builder for. Because right now, unfortunately, it adds cost to the builder's product. Right now, they don't have to do it because it's easy for them to sell houses today. So they don't necessarily have to add features to the house to sell it. But at the same time, consumers should be asking for indoor air quality and energy saving features in the homes that they're buying.
Right. And it's, as you're alluding to, Russell, it's such a challenge for many home buyers, because they may live in a home built in the 1970s or 80s and it doesn't have mechanical ventilation. They're not aware of it. They're like, well, I haven't been sick in my home per se. Well, that's one of those tough things for the human mind to remember, that they're like, oh, yeah, my kids did come home and we did get sick a month ago, and we all got sick a month ago as it spread. But that's just part of what happens, right? The kids go to school, they come home with stuff, and they make the rest of us sick. Well, from the things I've seen in homes that have great, airtight, really comfortable, energy efficient envelopes, and then having energy recovery or heat recovery ventilators, they don't get those house-wide spreads of sickness. But it's just tough because it's more anecdotal for many people. They haven't experienced it yet. We need like a virtual reality machine that people could go live in these different experiences or something to get them to understand and experience it. But until then, we hope Heart of a Building can help people, be one of the sources anyway for people to say, oh, hey, maybe that would help if we had one of those, honey, in the house, or in our apartment or our commercial building or wherever you're at.
We are starting to see some of the code requirements. So we're starting to see some select areas that are requiring balanced ventilation with energy or heat recovery ventilators. So those are good trends to see happening throughout the nation. A lot of times it happens more on the West Coast, and then as they adopt it on the West Coast, it kind of works its way east. But at the same time, that shouldn't prevent us. It shouldn't be a code requirement, right? It should just be something that manufacturers and builders do because it's the right thing to do. And it supports our environment. We're talking about sustainability, and one of the things that manufacturers really need to be aware of is that consumers are looking for these companies that have sustainability practices, that are doing things that are helping the environment long term, that we're not degrading things. So that's certainly some messaging that is important, because there's a cost to that, right? Manufacturers to have sustainability manufacturing or sustainable manufacturing processes and to utilize materials the proper ways and do the recycling, it potentially costs more than just making the cheapest product that you potentially can. So, I guess what I'd like your input on is some of the corporate obligations that, what should corporations feel kind of obligated to as far as sustainability?
Well, that's a great question. So I really like it. One of the key things, I guess, Russell, I'd say is any of the companies, and honestly, I've known of Panasonic a long time, but only really came to know of like your 7 founding principles when you introduced me to them earlier this year, and they're quite beautiful. Really where you guys come from. So I'd recommend, for other companies, they should take a look at your guys' founding principles and see how they align or don't align with their current values as far as caring about community and caring about the environment. But beyond that, I'd say it's a big, important thing to be really wanting to genuinely educate, like what you and I are trying to do through this, what I'm trying to do through Heart of a Building, what we've talked about, that if companies are really in that position of offering great, let's say, energy efficient products, and we can then talk about, the embodied energy in that product and how they recycle, and we can get into those. But a key part would be, well, first of all, they have to make good products, right? So it's not a greenwashing scenario, but make great products, but then really work on educating, really get the messaging out there about the fact that this stuff is so important for consumers, and it is available. It's very viable to build and live in now net zero energy buildings. I'll take a quick tangent and just say one of the a couple of future stories we're looking at doing in the Pittsburgh area for Heart of a Building. I've been amazed to hear about the stories there and what they've done in the affordable housing market. And they're finding that to build zero emission, net zero energy, affordable housing, for people, is actually coming in at a lower cost than the cost of building code compliant construction. That's one, honestly, I still have to investigate further through our interview process, but it's not at this point anymore where it's like it's crazy expensive to do. And if insulation manufacturers, if lighting manufacturers, if HVAC manufacturers, if airtightness tape manufacturers, if they were all working together to be educating people, to say these things are available and exist, it would help so much. But then to your bigger point, you have to go back and make sure that a company is living to what it's preaching, and they should be, if it's a HVAC company, making products that are all high efficiency beyond what code minimums require, or have a large segment of that. I certainly know that there are major manufacturers where they're like, hey, Paul, I love what you're doing, love what you're talking about, but it's like our core is to build to code, code required products because that's where the market is. I'm like, I respect that, but at the same time, if they want to be helping be a part of a solution, whether it's climate change, whether it's giving, home buyers, building and home occupants really what they deserve when they are going into a new or retrofit building, if they're caring about them in that way, as opposed to just, the bottom line dollars in their pockets. If they're caring in that way, they should be getting that messaging out about this, but also making those products where it is, high efficiency air source heat pumps, let's say, and less manufacturing of, 80% efficient natural gas or propane powered furnaces. They should say, oh yeah, there's more of those available. The price is coming down on those and it's going to be more expensive for you to buy an 80% efficient furnace. It's part of that, but it's certainly, you guys, like I said, to your credit at Panasonic, the values that you guys live by would be a place I'd recommend for other companies. They should look at those and see, oh, we match some of those, but not all of those. How can we grow into some, to the rest of those? So, I'm not an employee of Panasonic, but I'm happy to say it because I was deeply impressed when I saw those values that you guys live by.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those challenges. And you mentioned, the code minimum is, unfortunately, it's a big part of the market. And, it's kind of one of those things. If some manufacturers kind of raise the bar, then it changes their playing field of where they're competing. And, we're doing our best to try to rise the tide. So, rising tide to raise all the ships to new levels of performance. But it takes some time. And the things that we want to think about is, what products will we put in our own homes and to protect our own families and loved ones and pets or whatever else in your home, or even the structural integrity of your house. A lot of things can happen that if you don't ventilate properly, then you can compromise the integrity of the home as well. So it's one of those things where it's a struggle. It's that balance, to sell a more expensive product that does have the higher qualities that consumers are really looking for. What we have to do is just to make them aware that they should be looking for those higher quality products that are performing better for them.
You're exactly right. And just on that note, we touched on the structural side. I'll just say this. I'm sure many of the people that view this are aware of it, but the climate is changing. Weather patterns are becoming more severe. And so for many people, especially in coastal areas, but for many people across the country, having structures that can withstand higher winds and, longer patterns of high, levels of moisture, rain, particularly, the flooding challenges that people face in the Miami area and other areas. It's like, those things are all part of a reality. I think if people would know that there's so many companies in particular working on great products that are available today, providing great products that are available today, that they can feel that there's solutions for them in this changing world. And one of the things I'll share, I didn't say in the beginning, this, Russell, but it's like why I work in the built environment is that it's nearly 40%, of our annual emissions in our country that come connected to buildings. It's about 28% from the operation and about 11% in the manufacture and construction of materials that go into buildings. And again, for me, I was deeply moved around the issue of climate change. I think a lot of people are. And I'll just say to anyone watching, you have the ability to make a big impact if you do anything in the place you live and the place you work to make them more energy efficient, more durable, better indoor air quality, feeding into this, and then adding renewable energy to the mix. You make a huge impact. So you're not disempowered, and it will take legislative action, like things that are happening in negotiations, with the UN and world leaders, but you can do so much just as an individual, making changes to your home and space that you live, that I think it's a beautiful place. Because to me, it always felt like it was more challenging to change other elements of the world, but where you live, you have a lot of power over and to make changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to give you the opportunity to really, you know, be a cheerleader for the heart of a building and kind of help understand where should we go to look for information, where the television program is going to be broadcast, and where can they go and look and see actually the recorded sessions that have already occurred on your website.
Cool. So thank you on that, Russell. So Heart of a Building, our first episode airing on Earth Day week of 2021. It's an hour-long episode showcasing 3 stories, one a single family, one a commercial retrofit, and then a multifamily affordable project that's great. All of them focused in Colorado, all of them taking place in Colorado. You can see all of those episodes either at our website at heartofabuilding.com, or better yet, you can see them at the Rocky Mountain PBS website, and you go there to their Watch streaming service, and you click on the Watch and type in the search field Heart of a Building. Anyway, I hope you all can check those out and enjoy them, and you can get back to us at Heart of a Building with feedback. We'd love that.
Great. Yeah, one of the things that Paul mentioned a little while ago is what we can do individually as consumers. So I think I'd just like to close on that. Think of the little things that you can do at your house, whether it's air sealing or getting more efficient products, changing the lighting to LED lights, for example. But any of those little changes that you can make, remember, elephants eat peanuts. And each little change that we can incorporate as individuals, they add up, right? So they add up to the big picture. So look around your house, think of what you might be able to do to increase the energy efficiency and be a little bit more cognizant of your environment at home and at work. So thank you for joining us, Paul. It was great. I can't imagine that we could abbreviate some of the discussions, but certainly we're going to extend our conversations on other platforms. And Panasonic looks to continue to support some of the work that we're doing to educate the public about sustainability and energy efficiency and indoor air quality. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Russell.